It was 20 years ago, this very month, that I submitted the first paper I ever wrote as a Shakespeare research paper to my class at Southern Oregon University. I had only been retired for about 8 or 9 months, and I dove right into the Shakespeare studies. And in that class, my instructor, Liz Eckhart, fabulous teacher, she struts in and on day one, and she says, okay, Shakespeare biography, doesn't tell us anything about the place. Let's start. Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 1. Who's there? What a great start. I was blessed by her open-mindedness because she approved my progress on what I began to research. I was curious about the parallels between Greek tragedy and Shakespearean tragedy. So I went into the Hannon Library when it was time to start doing research on my Hamlet paper, and I entered in one field Hamlet, and in the second field Orestes, pushed enter, and my life changed and hasn't been the same for the past 20 years. Last years of my life have been more enriched by this engagement and knowing people like yourselves and other colleagues and knowing how courageous it is to go out there and stand before the people and tell them a story they may not want to hear. and at the end of the play, laugh and joyfully join in the celebration of life, which is encompassed in the theatrical experience. This is a religious level experience of life, of transformation and acceptance and belief and, just your ability to pull in the full human experience. And the draw that has. And the drama is part of that religious tradition. And the singing and the chanting and all of it is part of the richest, oldest tradition in which humans clung to each other in creating belief systems that sustained them and made their lives meaningful.
Welcome, fellow Quillers, to this sad but celebratory episode as we grieve the loss of our dear friend, Dr. Earl Showerman, and pay tribute to the most frequent guest in Quiller history and his contributions towards solving the Shakespeare authorship mystery. I am joined by my lovely wife, Annie. Hello, my dearest partner in greatness.
Hello, dearest. I am very honored to be a part of this episode to honor Earl and all of his contributions to the podcast.
You knew Earl very well, as you often appeared in episodes together, and Earl frequently visited our home to record episodes.
Yes.
When we visited Earl's home to record episodes, we always enjoyed lunch together, often accompanied by a bottle of wine or some of my home-brewed beer, which Earl always enjoyed when I
Yes.
would bring it with me or send him home with a bottle when he came here to the house. And as I've said before, Earl was more than a guest and a supporter of the program. He was a true friend, a reliable confidant, a wise mentor, a knowledgeable sounding board, and an honest advisor, often telling me things I didn't want to hear, but needed to hear in his superbly diplomatic manner, and he will be terribly missed. When I first met Earl, I didn't like him. I thought he was a blowhard and a showboater who thought he was some sort of a ladies' man, a wannabe performer who found the SOF as his personal stage and captive audience. We met at the SOF conference in Pasadena in 2012. It's hard to believe it's been that long ago.
I know, right?
But,
seems like a lifetime ago.
It does, in many ways. It's true. So much has happened over the years since then. John Shahan of the Shakespeare Authorship Coalition, also a multiple episode guest of this program, he invited me to attend the conference after I made contact with him and invited him to make a presentation at my Shakespeare Festival in Redlands, California at the time. And in that first conference in Pasadena, I found Earl to be aloof and dismissive towards me. as if he saw me as some sort of an upstart crow with too many questions and too many suggestions to give. It also didn't seem to sit well with him when Michael York appeared as planned at that conference. And then it was revealed that Michael and I knew each other somewhat through the various communications that we had been having, trying to schedule him to appear as a presenter at my Shakespeare festival. And I know there were a lot of people in the room who were kind of surprised when Michael was like, "Stephen, how are you?" And they were like, "What? How is this? Who is this guy?" Yeah. I mean, who was this guy? I was quite likely the youngest person in the room, which wasn't uncommon. I think it's maybe changed a little bit now.
I would hope so.
Maybe. Mainly because I'm so much older now. But true to form, I came in like a bull in a china shop that I can be. And the status quo did not shine to me much, which was, sort of a presage of years to come. Nonetheless, I remember being invited to attend this after dinner one night of the conference on the patio of this restaurant. And SOFers took up the entire patio. We filled the whole section. The table was packed and you could barely fit. People were elbow to elbow. It was hard for people to get up from one end of the table and move through to get into the main restaurant to even use the restroom. And the major discussion at the time was about how to move the needle, how to gain some attention, and also how to counter the new book that the Birthplace Trust was due to publish in 2013, which they were calling Shakespeare Beyond Doubt. And I remember suggesting that if we wanted to spread our message to the masses, we should take a page out of Edward de Vere's own book and produce a play about him and the authorship mystery. Reach audiences, use the theater as a propaganda machine the way our author did, which was sort of poo-pooed by certain people who were there, including Earl. Yeah, whatever. This theater guy who showed up out of nowhere and thinks he knows everything. Someone else suggested that the SOF should publish their own book, countering the arguments of the Birthplace Trust cohort planning their Shakespeare Beyond Doubt. And I don't remember who it was that made that first suggestion, but it became very popular throughout the evening, and it was decided that night. And I'm very proud to say that I was there when Shakespeare Beyond Doubt ? Was birthed as an idea, and through the efforts, mostly I believe of John Sheehan, that book did get published and became sort of the Oxfordian counter to the Birthplace Trust trying to claim that there was no doubt at all that the Stratford man was the author. I don't know if you remember me attending that Pasadena conference or not, or how much I might have reported upon returning each night after the conference.
It was still pretty early on in our relationship. You might not have wanted to scare me away.
That's probably true. I probably didn't even tell you I was going to this weird Shakespeare authorship
conference. Let's not give it away yet.
It's true. We hadn't even known each other a whole year by that point.
No, we hadn't.
No,
yeah, I think you kind of kept your cards a little close to your chest as far as that went. Again, not to frighten me away, not to come on too strong. You come on strong with all the other SOFers, but with me, you were a little guarded. Don't send her running for the hills just yet with all my crazy Shakespeare authorship ideas.
I suppose that is probably part of it. Yeah. The following year, 2013, they held their conference in Toronto, which was way too far for me to travel. And in 2014, it was in Madison, Wisconsin. Same thing. It was too far for me and for my finances at the time. As well, we were newly married. We had a new baby
to support.
Yeah. And we were living in a tiny little apartment in Koreatown of Los Angeles. But by 2015, the SOF conference was planned for Ashland, Oregon. Of course, that was Earl's backyard. And he had a big hand in the planning process, including securing discount tickets for 3 Shakespeare plays they were presenting that year. Yes, the OSF, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, used to present 3 full-length Shakespeare plays per season back then. I know that's shocking, considering they're down to like 2 now.
Mm.
And then and one of them's always some kind of a weird version.
No. They're back to 3 this year. And it's
Oh.
not a weird version. I mean, they always adapt them in a very different way, but it's the full Shakespeare plays this year. And they're doing 3 next year too.
Wow. Well, look at that.
Yeah, there you go.
Earl would have been happy about
Yes,
that. I'm sure.
indeed.
Well, it was perfect for us because your family lived up here nearby. So I had free lodging, and you and Stella, our other children weren't born yet.
No, not even a thought yet.
You could visit with Grandma while I spent days at the conference.
That's
and then
right,
I
yes.
would drive back from Ashland and come back to your mom's each night.
That was the year we saw Pericles, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We
I
did.
feel like that is probably where I actually met Earl for the first time. I feel like it was in the audience of Pericles when I saw a bunch of SOF people and they were like introducing themselves to me. And
Yes, I think
that was
you're right.
probably it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. That was a great conference. There were so many great presentations. I remember particularly Ross Barber giving a great presentation. Tom Renier, of course, was always informative and entertaining. Well, that was my first real interaction with Roger Strittmatter, too. And I remember Jim Warren was already forwarding his mission to try to get the organization more motivated and to try to really challenge the halls of academia in a new and different way. I remember having a delightful lunch on the patio of the historic hotel there with Don Rubin and his wife, Patricia. And we discussed some of the ideas that I'd thrown out in panel discussions during the conference about the importance of PR and marketing strategies. But Earl still sort of remained aloof. I remember coming home and telling you there's this guy who's kind of like the cock of the walk there. And I remember him from Pasadena, and I don't think he likes me.
Oh.
And I also remember saying, which was always true, that he's by far the best and most dynamic speaker and presenter of the group, loaded with charisma. But I think he sees me as sort of the young theater guy as some sort of a threat. And I don't really think he likes me. And then, when you got to meet him at that performance of Pericles, of course, he was very charming.
Extremely charming.
And
All that
you,
charisma.
yeah, and you could see what I meant, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he still was kind of like, I don't know what I'd say, sort of standoffish towards me at that point. So fast forward, 2016, the conference was in Boston, couldn't make it. Siena was due like that November, like a month after the conference. So I wasn't able to go. 2017 was Chicago. We had 2 toddlers at home and a theater to run.
Yep.
So couldn't make it that far. But 2018 was Oakland. And that was the year that changed everything. Several giant things happened. If you remember, one, I submitted a paper to be presented regarding Oregon Shakespeare Festival's Play On project, where they were attempting to modernize the language of the plays.
Luckily, that was a very short-lived idea.
Right? My paper was accurate.
Yeah,
It was a terrible idea. And I said so.
Yeah, quite well. I think so, but I'm biased.
And my paper was accepted, and do you remember how excited I was about that?
Yes,
when
I do.
I got this email saying your paper has been accepted and be prepared to present, and you'll have this many. I think at that time that was 45 minutes they gave
I feel like my really first vivid recollection of anything to do with the SOF and the Shakespeare authorship question, like really super vivid, like kind of other memories are kind of vague, but is you prepping for that presentation, like you delivering it to me and kind of going over some of the things and all of that. And you were very nervous and very excited all at the same time.
You were my editor and my test audience.
Yep. Couple of times.
And my critic.
Yep.
And so that was one thing that happened. A second thing that happened was Julie Bianchi had convinced the board to attempt podcasting, and they put out this call for people who wanted to be involved in panel podcast discussions. I had several years of radio experience on top of my theater experience. So if you remember, I submitted. I'm like, oh, I'm going to submit for that. I know how to be on the air.
Right.
I can do this.
Yep.
And I remember when I received the email confirmation on that I'd been selected to do an episode with none other than two of the biggest SOS celebrities of all time, Don Rubin and Bonner Miller Cutting. And do you remember that? You remember?
Yes. Yes, I do remember that. That's a great episode still, the three of you.
It is.
Yeah. I think it was one
It's
of the
true.
first ones I ever listened to. I mean, it's obviously one of the very first original ones. But it's a very good episode. Yeah, you were. I'd met Bonner, I think, before, because didn't she come to present at your Shakespeare Festival at one point?
She did. She came and she presented her piece on like the writers who were tortured and maimed. And,
excellent.
And the whole question of, well, if all these other guys were being tortured and maimed and punished for the things they wrote, how come the writer of the works of Shakespeare never even once got called in for even questioning?
Right. And I remember thinking, oh, great. Yeah, that's great pairing. You guys will do well together, the two of you. I didn't really know anything about Don Rubin, but I was excited to hear you and Bonner together, because I know she's very dynamic and you're very dynamic. And what was the subject of that podcast episode? Was it the one about the will?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, great episode. Yeah, I loved that one.
So I got my ducks in a row. I got my paper finished. I prepped for the weekend in Oakland. And my world changed forever. I was the final speaker of the first day, which proved to be advantageous to me in so many ways. Because after my presentation, Earl actually spoke to me. Like he sought me out, particularly afterwards, and took me aside. And it was really the first time that we had any kind of like real one-on-one interaction other than, pleasantries or,
Sure.
that type of a thing.
Right.
And he told me how much he agreed with my points that I had presented in the paper, and how much the OSF administrators were going to hate me.
I mean, were they really paying any attention to it? I don't know. But
I mean, he commended me for my strong positions and the support material and the examples I provided.
Yes.
But then he admonished me for not being more diplomatic in my approach and for calling out certain OSF contributors by name, people that he knew personally.
Sure.
And he was like, "Oh, I don't know if you should have not done that." That would be the first of many times Earl would encourage me to be more diplomatic in my approach to things.
A lesson he's still learning every day.
Yes,
Everybody.
but suddenly this man who I thought didn't like me at all had decided to sort of take me under his wing and provide me some coaching and some advice. He helped guide me and coach me through the rest of the weekend, and then continued as my friend from that day forward. And I'm a better man today because of it. And that's the truth. I think that was the thing about Earl, is the people he came in contact with, he touched them in such a way that they were better for it. And I think of all the things that anyone could ever say about anyone that you would love to have people say about you after you're gone, is that you touched people in a meaningful way when you came into their lives.
Absolutely.
And Earl certainly did. He certainly did. There were some other things that happened that weekend. Here it was 3 years later. And much like Jim Warren, I found myself saying the exact same things that I had said 3 years earlier in Ashland. You need a marketing and PR campaign. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows what you do. You need to increase your profile. You need to generate regular content. You need to develop your social media. You need to fix your website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this time, there were people actually listening. Part of that had to do with people noticing that Earl had sort of taken me under his wing that weekend. I then was soon approached by Don Rubin and Roger Strittmatter with a proposal to assist the organization with marketing. And Earl backed their play. I had a great conversation at the bar with Bob Myers over a few drinks, which helped seal his vote of approval. And the next thing I knew, I had John Hamill offering me position on the board, which Roger immediately called out as a potential conflict of interest if the organization was going to contract me to do paid marketing work. And he was right. It's right there in the bylaws. He was like, I don't think that's going to work, guys. And that query brought in Brian Wildenthal, the legal beagle, and he was like, yeah, the bylaws don't allow for that. You guys can't put him in all of these different positions at once. But then that's where Brian got tapped to sort of be in charge of negotiating and solidifying the contract terms with me for doing marketing and PR for the organization. And at the same time, I think it was that Saturday morning that Dawn and Bonner and I were scheduled to meet with Jake in Jake's hotel room to record our panel podcast episode about Shakespeare's will. And Jake had been holed up in there, I think, the entire weekend with his equipment, recording these 3-person panel episodes. And I think there were originally 6 or 8 episodes planned. I think it ended up being 6.
Sounds about right.
I remember one of them not turning out to be the proper quality, and it never aired. It never got airtime because it had issues. I can't remember that. It's been so long ago.
Right.
And I don't remember which order ours was, but I want to say it was like number 3 or 4 in the 6. But I do remember ours was just after Hank Whittemore did his episode with his group that he was with. Because I remember it being my first real chance to talk with Hank as well, who was also very encouraging about my presentation and the points that I had been making about the need for marketing and PR. And he asked if we might get together later to talk more. And that became the beginning of another lifelong friendship and collaboration partner that I honor and cherish greatly. I think Hank holds the number 3 spot for the most Quiller episodes, right behind you and Earl, Annie.
Oh, it's quite possible. You would know better than I do, though.
Yeah. It's been too long since we've had Hank on. And
Agreed.
We need to do another episode soon. I have to reach out to him and ask him what else he'd like to talk about. It was a wild morning. There I was in this hotel room chatting with 2 Oxfordian icons about the authorship mystery. Jake, who I had just met minutes before, was sitting in the corner of the room operating the equipment under his headphones, which is a common way to see Jake. And once in a while, he would like hand signal us if we were straying away from the mics in order to look or talk directly to each other, because that sometimes happens when you turn your head and then
it does.
And then you can't be heard. So you had to remind us you got to stay on the mic. And he kept the timer going because there was another group due in there to record their episode. It was on a really particular time schedule because they also were trying to make sure we didn't miss too many presentations.
Right.
Because it was happening at the same time the presentations were going on downstairs. And so they were trying to make sure that we didn't, lose too much of what was being presented by being up there in the hotel room recording. And again, I don't remember exactly which number ours was, or how many Jake had recorded the day before, but I'm pretty sure we were like number 4 or 5. Anyway, I'll never forget this moment, and I'm sure I've told this story before, but it bears repeating. The recording ended. Dawn and Bonner and I sat there chatting about how we thought it had gone. Julie was in the room, I remember, sort of overseeing the process because it had been her idea to do this thing. And Jake turns to the room and he says, "You guys are going all about this all wrong. These 3-person panel episodes are not how podcasts are done. Podcast listeners listen because they're interested in the subject and because they like the host. You guys need a specific host for this series. That's the only way it's going to work. And the guy you need is sitting right there." And he pointed at me.
Thanks, Jake.
And here we are 8 years later. So, fellow Quillers, it's all Jake's fault, just in case you wanted to know. I was shocked. I thought, this is too much. I thought, certain people in this organization will be against this. They're not going to contract me to be their marketing director and tap me to be the host of their new podcast series. That's probably not going to happen. I remember specifically thinking, Earl isn't going to like this. He's worked really hard to be the charismatic celebrity of the organization. He's not going to take kindly to this upstart crow suddenly becoming the voice of Oxfordianism. And I was dead wrong. Earl was the most supportive of anyone, and he remained supportive throughout every step of the way. Even when things got weird with the other leaders of the organization, Earl stood by me and the mission of this program, and he never refused to do an episode whenever I asked, even filling in this spring while I was recovering from cancer surgery as a guest host of the program. It turns out it was others in power who had a problem with me becoming the voice of Oxfordianism, and eventually they tried first to control me. And Earl stepped in the middle of that and tried to mitigate the situation. He was an advocate for my freedom to produce the program as I saw fit. He stood up against those who wanted to control the content, the guests, the lengths of the episodes. He would commonly tell me that he'd said to them over and over again, he's an artist. You can't rein in an artist. You have to accept the good with the bad. The very reasons that we want him for this, the very reasons he's good at this, are the very reasons that you have a problem with him being so good at this and you need to stop. Eventually, some of those people decided to cancel my marketing contract and instead contract me only to be the host of the podcast. And this turned out to be a veiled effort to gain control over the program. See, prior to that, I was a volunteer host while working as a paid marketing director. They couldn't really exert their control over me as a volunteer, so they tried to change the game and it said, well, we don't want to contract you to do marketing anymore, but we'll pay you to do the podcast. But here are the new rules of you being our paid podcast employee. And Earl was completely against that and advised them against it and told them that it was a bad idea and it was going to backfire. But he got outvoted. But he stepped in again and he told me, this is exactly what he said. In fact, I still have the email that he sent me. And then we had a phone conversation later about the email. And he said, take the money. You and Jake do what you do. I'll run interference as much as I can. Stay diplomatic, Stephen. That's what he told me. Hold true to your guns, but support your growing family. And he said, play ball a little. And that was Earl, right? Always the diplomat, always trying to figure out a way to make everybody happy with the outcome somehow. He was always so wise and so supportive. When it was clear that Jake and I needed to break free of SOF and reclaim our intellectual property and creative license, Earl didn't blink. He supported our decision. He backed our play. He continued to support the program, and he continued to appear as a guest. And I remember him saying, they know not what they do when all of that happened. And laughing. We laughed together over a couple of glasses of wine one afternoon at how their need to control me in the program had lost them all control and input whatsoever. In his opinion, they failed at their diplomacy, but he saw it as their loss and the gain to Quillers everywhere. And he was proud to be a part of the Quiller Nation. It's not that Earl wasn't loyal to the SOF. Far from it. He tried to discourage me from petitioning to run for president of the organization when all of that went down.
Oh, yeah, that.
He said, "You made your point. You always hit them where they never see it coming. But what do you gain here?" He told me. "They'll never back your agenda. You'll be met with nothing but resistance. You don't need that stress. You don't need that platform. You have a platform of your own, and you've proven they can't take away that from you or control that. Enjoy the Quiller Nation, enjoy your family, and let it go." And I didn't listen. And then they tapped him to run for president. He knew, and they knew, that I wouldn't run against Earl. So I dropped it. As usual, Earl's sage wisdom was spot on. He stepped up. He served his year as president. And then he wisely stepped away to work on his book, Shakespeare's Greater Greek, which I happen to believe is one of the greatest contributions to solving the authorship mystery, because I think it proves clearly that the author of the Shakespeare canon not only was capable of reading classical texts in Greek and Latin, but also had access to those manuscripts. And there are very few people in Elizabethan England who would have had both, who were also likely to be putting that text to work in as source material for creating new work. The vast majority of the episodes Earl recorded with us were about his study of the Greek masters and their influence on the Shakespeare canon. And I believe he has better than anyone else proven that the writer of Shakespeare was able to read those Greek and Latin texts of classical sources that are found prevalent throughout the works. Just look at the titles of the episodes and what we covered together and how many there have been, honey.
So many of them.
So he's the true leader of what is now known as episode 4, which is titled It's All Greek to Me. Episode 26 was about Shakespeare's knowledge of medicine with some pointed Greek references, because he would often mention things like Galen and, is it the Hermetic Code? Is that the do no harm code of doctors?
Don't ask me. That's not my forte.
Episode 29 is all about the Greek influences in Macbeth.
That was a fascinating one.
We recorded episode 29 in the little building across from our driveway here on our property that we affectionately call our Jeet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so cold in there that we could see our breath.
Oh, jeez.
It was a good sound room. It was a good sound, but it was so freezing cold that day that by the time we were done, we were like, "Oh my God, let's get inside and get by the fire." It was so cold. Episode 32 surrounds A Midsummer Night's Dream. Episode 34 was sadly the tribute episode to Tom Renier. Episode 44 was a preview of the symposium that Earl and I planned together during COVID. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Episode 46 was the episode from that symposium that we recorded live together and broadcast on YouTube, thanks to Jake. Episode 57 was a preview of the Zoom-posium that was created the following spring. Episode 60 was our deep dive into Troilus and Cressida, another Greek episode. Episode 75 was when I finally got Earl to look into Titus Andronicus after years of pestering and prodding him to see that play as Shakespeare's great homage to the Greek masters. And he was so resistant.
So resistant to it.
For years, I bothered him about it. And I told him, you have to. You don't understand. It's all right there. You have to. And later on, I was so pleased when he finally did. I was so pleased when he said to me that he was grateful that I hadn't let up, that I had continued to push him to look into that play on a deeper level. He was so resistant to it because of the violence.
Yeah,
and the
it's not his
blood and the gore.
thing. He's too kind and diplomatic and... Yeah.
Ironically, he spent 30 years in an ER, and I'm sure he saw all kinds of horrific things. And on more than many occasions than he would have wanted to admit, I'm sure he literally held people's lives in his hand and sometimes probably watched them slip away from life as well. And so maybe that was part of him not wanting to really, venture into this bloody, brutal, savage play. But once he did, and he realized and he saw it the way that I encouraged him that he would see it when he finally dove deep into it as this, Shakespeare's version of a Greek tragedy. And Greek tragedies are bloody and violent. And I mean, Oedipus gouging out his eyes and Antigone hanging herself in a cave. And there's a lot of...
I mean, Medea kills her children.
Right?
I don't know that it gets any more bloody and gruesome than that.
Yeah, I mean, so and why to get revenge upon her husband, right?
Hell hath no fury.
Yee. But he thanked me later, and then when he was working on his book, and he was able to include that work that he had done on Titus in his book, he told me that he was so pleased to make sure that had been a part of the book. Because he felt that it was a very important part of the whole collective of Shakespeare's Greater Greek. The next was episode 134, and it was the Orestian Hamlet. One of the best of all time.
Definitely.
Yeah, his comparisons between Hamlet and Orestes are magnificent.
And a fascinating section in his book, Shakespeare's Greater Greek. I think I read it a couple of times.
It is one of the best
sections.
Yeah, he was very passionate about that.
With good reason.
Then episode 140 was our tribute episode to Alexander Waugh. Which we recorded in his office at his home on that day, I remember. Episode 146 was about teaching the authorship mystery to students at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute there in Ashland, which he did for many years, making many new converts along the way. Mm-hmm. And some of those converts very... high-level academics who at first were very resistant.
Yes.
But because of Earl's charm and charisma and his unyielding commitment to the truth.
His passion for it.
Yeah. He turned some heads. Sometimes he would tell stories about turning heads, not necessarily the best way. Because he did get some backlash from some people over there a few times. He would share those stories with me. But for the most part, well received and opened some eyes, some very important eyes. Then there was episode 177, which you and I recorded with Earl about his book. And then most recently, episode 184, which he guest hosted to talk with Cheryl Egan Donovan about her new film project. That was in May. He recorded that episode in our living room so I could convalesce. And I never would have believed he would be gone less than 3 months later.
No, nor would I.
That's 15 episodes out of 192 regular episodes, and that is by far the current record. Today's episode right now, as we record it, my love, is number 13 for you.
Oh, shucks.
Earl still has you by 2.
Shucks, Earl.
And if he were here right now, I can hear his very unique and distinct laugh in my head right now.
I can hear it too.
Yeah.
He'd be very proud to know that he's still ahead.
He would, because
we had a fun little banter
yeah,
about who
he
was
enjoyed
leading the
poking
mark.
you about that.
He did. He did.
He was
okay.
Always, I got you, Annie.
You know, if I am going to allow someone else to hold the title, I'm happy that it's Earl. But I'm coming for it.
As I mentioned, Hank Whittemore holds the number 3 spot with 8 total appearances so far. So watch out. Hank could catch up to you.
Yeah, he could. We'll see.
I would like to go back to episodes 44 and 46 for a minute, though. After 192 episodes, when you think about it, 44 and 46, that's pretty far back.
Yes, it is.
You know, that's like 150 episodes ago, almost. Somewhere near the later part of season 2, it was 2020. COVID was crushing everything. And the SOF had been making such great strides the previous year. The 2019 conference in Connecticut witnessed record-breaking in-room attendance. There were students from nearby colleges that attended free presentations that I was able to convince the board that they should offer to the public to try to sort of open the door to people who weren't paying members to attend. We achieved 2 separate stories in the Hartford Daily newspaper, the big major daily there, as well as some mentions in a couple of the smaller local community weeklies surrounding the area. The SOF online presence had quadrupled. Google searches were bringing the website forward due to digital presence in other community newspapers around the country, regardless of how small that newspaper might be. Once it hit the internet, it helped raise the internet profile, right? Because it was another place somewhere on the web that the organization was mentioned, and that helped drive it up the rankings as far as searches go. And Earl and I believed that we couldn't just let that momentum die due to COVID. We'd all suffered the loss and the shock of the loss of Tom. And we felt, Earl and I talked about this very extensively, and we felt that Tom wouldn't have wanted to see the organization just stifle and lick its wounds for an entire year or until this COVID thing was lifted and over. So Earl and I worked very closely together during the summer, before that fall, to make a success out of that fall symposium, the way we had done the year before, working on the Ashland Symposium that was held over here in Ashland in 2019. That was literally right before we moved up here.
Yeah.
Like literally
like
right
a month before. Yeah.
before we moved up here. And that event had been a great success. It included the first ever open to the public Authorship 101 event, which we presented on the campus of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in that little auditorium there next to their box office.
Yep.
To a pretty solid house full of people, too, if you remember. We achieved press in the Medford Daily newspaper, and we successfully were able to get Roger Strittmatter on the cover of the Ashland Tidings.
Yeah, I remember that cover.
Yeah. There he was in the Hannon Library looking over the first folio,
Yep.
I think
Yep.
was the photo.
Uh-huh.
we were hitting the authorship mystery hard, right in the lap of the most notable Shakespeare festival in the country. And because of that success, we knew that we could pull off another event somehow, even during COVID. So we got in touch with Ben August, who graciously opened up his Napa home for us to broadcast live from. Earl and I were able to secure Jake's services and get him up to Napa from LA. We convinced the board to back the finances to help support the cost of that. And we were able to gather enough Oxfordian celebrities from mostly the Bay Area of Northern California who were close enough to Napa. Some of them drove over just for a day. Some of them came and spent the weekend there at Ben's. Again, he was a gracious host for all of us. And we created a full weekend of content that saw somewhere around 1,500 live viewers during its peak of the weekend, which Jake was able to track and show us. And I remember us all being so excited about that many people tuning in from all over the country and in other parts of the world even to watch that Napa Symposium happen live. It was a really tremendous weekend.
I remember watching it from our home on our TV. I hooked it up to the TV so I could see you guys during it for parts of the time. The kids and I had fun.
I blasted press releases and emails to my entire national press list that month before. Starting as much as I think I did my 90, 60, 30, 14 formula that I do for most PR. Because after all, live on YouTube meant you could watch it from any market. So it wasn't about we're going to be doing a conference in Connecticut. And so sending that to someone in Ohio, they could care less. Right. But this, because it was going to be broadcast live, I hit all the markets. I hit every media outlet on my list across the nation. And I think, and we got some press in some certain places, and mostly digital formats. At that point, not as many newspapers were only digital.
Right.
They were, but a lot of the printed products were moving to more digital. So we got a lot of digital references and at least calendar listings and that kinds of thing that helped sort of boost the signal. And so we were so excited to see it succeed the way that it did with 1,500 viewers tuning in on that first day. And then the next day it was a little less, not quite as many. But still was well over 1,000, I would say over 1,200 and something on Saturday. It worked. So then we thought, well, let's do it again in the spring because, the COVID restrictions hadn't lifted yet and things were still kind of weird. It had been a whole year, but it was still weird. All of the stuff with the vaccine was going on and you either had to have it or don't have it, or if you don't get it, you're fired, or all this kind of stuff that was happening at that time. And we said, well, we sort of rose above it and worked around it in the fall. Let's do it again in the spring. But certain powers that were nixed the idea of doing something in person, like the small group who attended Napa. And instead they decided to do a completely virtual Zoom event. And it suffered problems. It suffered technical problems. There was less intriguing content. Some of the content was recorded and sort of then broadcast instead of live. It became difficult to moderate. Some people, the whole thing of mute yourself, unmute yourself, don't mute yourself, that happens when you have that many people all in one Zoom. And it just didn't meet the expectations set by the fall event. And I remember Earl telling me that he thought that certain East Coast members had been jealous of the success and how much fun the West Coast group had in Napa. And he also said many of them were just terrified of COVID, just so afraid. Like the loss of Tom really shell-shocked a lot of people in the organization and made them very fearful of leaving their homes or going to anything that would involve, or the organization supporting or sponsoring something that would involve any size group getting together. And so that kind of was the end of that, and it was a shame. But Earl was very fond of saying, many, many times he said this to me, that it's going to take a lot of funerals to change the paradigm of the authorship mystery. In the earlier years, he meant on the Stratfordian side of the fence, but later he conceded that the slogan applied to both sides. Always encouraging that Oxfordianism needed new, younger, fresh faces eager to conduct their own research, pore over what had been examined before to see if there was something new to find new discoveries, and reach new audiences in new ways. And that's why he was such a fan of this program and the Quiller Nation. He saw the vision early on, and he supported it all the way to the end.
I think you completely lucked out, because it happens to be that one of the most charismatic and well-informed and just wonderful speakers also happens to only live like 30 minutes away from us. And so we were blessed to have Earl that close. It allowed you to do in-person recordings with him very easily. There was a recording, and I don't think you even mentioned on there was one that I hosted with you and Earl, and I like grilled you guys on all the different like random Oxfordian questions that I had as somebody who is basically a newbie to Oxfordianism. And Earl was always just so dynamic to speak to, and such a pleasure to sit and discuss things with. And I always felt like the 2 times that he and I were on the recordings together, I could have just kept speaking to him, and we, it could have turned into like a 3-hour-long episode. Could have just kind of keep going back and forth. And
so, in other words, you didn't need me there. You and Earl could have just.
I think we'd have done okay. I mean, it was great to have you there too, babe. But I think Earl and I, in a pinch, could have done great, just the 2 of us. Regardless, what I'm saying is that we were really fortunate to have him that close to us. And not just that. Okay, he will work. He was dynamic. He was charismatic. He was all of the things that you have said he was. And so, I mean, aside from just the quantity of episodes he delivered on the Quiller podcast, the quality is immense as well. Like all of them, just wonderful episodes, and worth listening to multiple times, I think.
And I think you're right. I think I did miss that episode, which would then put him at 16 and you at 14. I
just outed myself.
No, because you both
okay,
gained,
we both gained. We're okay. We're good. Yeah.
So it still keeps you 2 episodes apart.
Yeah. That was a fun one.
You're right. In my review of the episodes and going back, I think I missed that one.
I always remember, too, that Earl would come when Earl came to our house for the couple of times that he recorded. He would bring the books. And Shakespeare's Greater Greek was one of them, too. And there was another one that he contributed to that, unfortunately, I'm blanking in my memory, and hopefully it will come to us before the end of the episode. It was a book that he contributed to, Ross Barber, I believe, contributed to, which is like a great compilation. And again, still me, very new. And Earl would come and he'd bring a book and he'd be like, oh, Annie and Stephen, I brought this book. And, Stephen would read it eventually, but I'd always be like, me first. And I'd steal it from him and I'd go, I want to read it. And, anything Earl has had his hand on, I want to read first before Stephen got his hands on it. I remember reading Shakespeare's Greater Greek on our trip to Europe last year last fall. And I can envision myself laying on a beach in Cannes reading Shakespeare's Greater Greek. And I remember also too, we were in Tosa de Mar and I was reading that book and it sparked up a great conversation with that Australian couple we met there and ended up, having a wonderful time with the rest of the evening, because the first thing that she asked me about was, oh, you're interested in Shakespeare, and it, off of my book. And I loved traveling with Earl's books and reading them and stealing them from you so that I got to read them first.
It's true. As I look over at the bookshelf, there's at least 5 or 6 volumes there that he provided to me as a gift. Usually somebody else's book that had recently been published,
right.
And he would buy extra copies and then he would bring a copy to me. Like, do you have so-and-so's book yet? You need to have this.
He was great about
here's
that.
This one for you, or here's that one for you. Oh, you don't have that one yet? Well, here's this. Oh, and here, my granddaughter's husband is a winemaker, and here's a bottle of their wine that they make. And like they always say, beware Greeks bearing gifts. Well, it's okay if it's a Greek master bearing gifts.
Earl's gifts were always welcome. Books and wine, I don't think you can go wrong.
Nope, not at all. He was a gem of a man and a great friend. Our final conversation on the phone was about trying to schedule a time for me to go to his home one last time and record a final episode.
Yeah.
That unfortunately didn't happen, as he declined very rapidly in the final few days. But he was hopeful until the end, sending me a message suggesting that, well, maybe early next week I'll be feeling stronger and we can make it happen. And there was no next week after that message. But he, even to the end, was applauding my latest efforts to bring more Orthodox scholars onto the program to discuss their work, as an effort to demonstrate to Orthodox scholars that we all have more in common than most Stratfordians think we do. And that major common thread is our love for the text. And I think that, he and I would talk about that, and he would say, "Oh, you're doing great work, Stephen. You're doing great things. These people who always saw us Oxfordians as the crazy tinfoil hat fringe, they come on your program and you talk to them and they see how knowledgeable you are and they understand that you're actually more in line with them than they think. And it's just this one thing that we differ in opinion on. And you're doing great things," he would say. So I love him for that, because he was, like I said, always so encouraging to the very end. And I'll always be grateful to him for his friendship, his support, and his guidance.
He was encouraging of us in all of our efforts. I mean, he was a great supporter of our Shakespeare company that we have here in Southern Oregon. I remember when he came last year and saw Hamlet, I think I was the most nervous. I know I was the most nervous knowing that he was in that audience that night, because, I'm going to be playing Hamlet for a man who knows the text in and out. And I've read his studies on the Oresteia Hamlet. And so, he really knows this. Most of my audiences don't know it nearly as well as Earl does, but his kind words and the email that he sent to me after just praising my performance and praising specific things about my performance that I just loved, that helped me to see that he wasn't just saying it to say it. He did see in my performance of Hamlet things to praise, and that was a lot to me. That meant a lot, coming from someone who is such a scholar and has been seeing plays at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival for a good portion of his life and knows Shakespeare like the back of his hand. He was so jovial and so supportive, and then he and I sat close together the following weekend to see Comedy of Errors, and it was just wonderful to be with him in the audience and hear him laugh at the jokes that other people might not be picking up on, and just watching him enjoy himself and thoroughly enjoying the performance, and knowing that my husband had directed a performance that he enjoyed. It meant a lot to us. I was sad that he wasn't able to make it to this year's performance. He was scheduled to come but couldn't make it because of his health, and I was very sad because it was always one of my favorite. He was always one of my favorite audience members.
Yeah. Again, that very distinct laugh of his, and the jovial nature of him when he was pleased with something, that the exuberance of it that he couldn't restrain and conceal. And you're right, the message that he sent you last year after Hamlet was pointed, right? And it was from a person who knew the text well, who knew the character well, who knew the relationships of the play. And he saw certain things and choices that were made and decisions in the performance that he enjoyed because of how well he knew the text and the characters and the relationships. And you're right, that is one of the best critics, as it were.
Right. It's not that just, oh, you're so wonderful, or how did you memorize all those lines, or he understood it.
He did
never
make a comment about, wow, what a feat, right?
Yes, of course
he did. He did say that.
He knew better than to go to the how did you memorize all the lines questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he was also a great resource for me through my own medical struggles, of course. And I'll miss having his opinions and advice as I continue to face my own battle with this.
I know there have been times
deadly
recently.
disease that equalizes us all. And, I'll miss not being able to call him and say, hey, this is what my doctors are saying, or this is what I'm facing next. And how do you feel about this medication? Or how do you feel? He was always willing to share that expertise of himself with me as well. We even shared the same oncologist, so we discovered. So, just another thing that we happen to have in common. But I don't want to conclude the episode with talk about cancer. And I'll provide everyone with an update about my own condition very soon. But for now, I just want to share a few more words about our friend Earl. He loved jazz music. He loved to dance. I remember we all went to a little jazz bar in Oakland one night during that conference. And man, Earl could cut a rug, boy.
I believe it. I'm sad I never got to see Earl dance.
And he truly was a ladies' man. The ladies love to dance with Earl. Those doctors always have it going on.
Yep.
Right? He was a regular George Clooney for looks and Patrick Dempsey for charm, to steal a few TV references. I know I just conflated two different doctor shows into one.
Oh, we all know who you're talking about.
I'm sure you do.
George and McDreamy.
Yeah. And Earl could be both of those all at once. I do remember he and I almost had an outright fight over, if you could call it that, over his years-long push to hold a conference in New Orleans, which I was adamantly against. I thought it was a terrible idea. I thought it was a terrible location. I accused him of putting his own love for jazz and his jazz desires ahead of what was actually good for the organization. He did admit to me, as was his way, that he'd been pushing for it for so long that he wasn't about to back down until he succeeded.
You know that about yourself too. So,
and he got his way. And by all accounts, it was a successful event, jazz and all. In fact, I trust Elizabeth Winkler tremendously, and she attended, and she said it was a really successful event. So I believe her, and if she says it was a good conference, then it must have been a good conference.
All right, you concede. Earl, you win.
The involvement of Tulane University or some professors from there, I think, was also good, high point of it as well. The only thing we ever really fought about, though,
beyond New Orleans,
was Bob Dylan.
It's an unpopular opinion Stephen's about to put out here.
I thought it was going to end our friendship one day when I told him I hated Bob Dylan.
I told you, unpopular opinion, huh, fellow Quillers?
I mocked Bob Dylan singing. I was like, and he got downright mad at me. Finally, he got mad. He got really mad, and it really offended him. It really upset him. He loved Bob Dylan, and he was like, "You don't go talking bad about Bob Dylan."
Bob Dylan is a tremendous poet.
Finally, he told me I was too young to appreciate Bob Dylan's poetry, and the importance of the time and the era of Bob Dylan's poetry. That I needed to re-examine that and look at why Bob Dylan had been chosen poet laureate. And he was very happy that had happened, and he felt that was a remarkable and fitting thing, and that we would just have to agree to disagree. Yes. And never talk about Bob Dylan again. And we never did, ever again.
Well, you know what I will always say is Bob Dylan's songs are wonderful when sung by other people.
Yes, okay, sure. He's a good songwriter.
He's a fantastic songwriter.
He's a poet, sure. And
wonderful
poet laureate.
Poet.
Fine. But he should keep his mouth closed.
All right, feel free to write in all the hate mail you want, Quillers, about just Stephen's poor opinion of Bob Dylan.
He was always a diplomat, and I'm sure he's up there right now forging an agreement between Edward de Vere and Stratford Willie.
I hope he's hanging out with Edward de Vere right now.
He's got Eddie on one side and Willie on the other, and he's trying to figure out a way that they can both receive joint credit for this deal. Because that was Earl, and I wouldn't put it past him. I love you, brother. Teach those angels how to play some mean jazz, and cut a cloud or two with some suave dance moves up there, buddy. You will be forever missed.
Thank you for sharing your incredible mind, your incredible heart, and just everything that made you you. We will miss you.
Earl Roy Showerman, how more noble can you get?
I don't think it's possible.
And something we always laughed about is our son Skylar's middle name is also Roy. So it was just another connection that we had because that was my dad's name. And so we decided to give that middle name to our son. And so it was always funny to me that there was Earl Roy and Skylar Roy sometimes hanging out together here at the house. So God bless you, Earl. And I'm sure if he were here right now, he would tell all of you to keep asking questions.
We know that Thomas Smith put on the plays of Aristophanes at Cambridge in the 1530s and 1540s, and he had those plays in a folio edition in his library during the time the Earl of Oxford was living with him.
Right, there you go.
What wouldn't interest the Earl of Oxford more than the comedies of this fabulous, writer,
Sure.
Aristophanes,
Yes.
Because of the web we all live in, I got the lead, and then I carried it to a finish line. And that's really what I believe the metaphor that I lived for the last 20, 25 years is I found a golden thread. And I found other golden threads, and we wove them into a tapestry that creates a template of consciousness, of interest and fascination with a Greek root that has been unrecognized and denied for way, way too long. And that now we have scholars who are shaking that tree down, and those golden apples are going to fall on somebody.